I slept with his brother 15 years ago. My sterile husband now demands his sperm to forgive me. But I just discovered his forgiveness comes with a $10 million price tag. I am currently locking myself in the bathroom of our Greenwich estate, shaking so hard I can barely breathe. My husband, James, just handed me a non-disclosure agreement. He wants me to prostitute my womb to his estranged brother, Lucas, solely to unlock a family trust fund before he goes bankrupt. He claims this is my penance for a mistake I made when I was 23, but while he is downstairs celebrating his brilliance with his parents, I am holding a folder of evidence that proves our entire marriage was a long con. He is not just a grieving husband wanting a child. He is a predator who engineered my trauma to control me. At what point does a marriage vow become a death sentence for your soul? How do you look at the man you have shared a bed with for 15 years and realize he has been selling you out piece by piece? I am holding the match that could burn this entire dynasty to the ground, but lighting it means destroying myself in the process. Everyone, I am terrified and alone. What should I do? My name is Alice Sterling. I am 38 years old, a former interior designer who traded her career for a wedding ring. And currently, I am a professional disappointment. I live in Greenwich, Connecticut, in a sprawling $4 million colonial estate that smells of lemon polish and old money. To the outside world, I am the enviable wife of James Sterling, the scion of a local real estate dynasty. To the members of the Greenwich Country Club and the relentless gossips of our homeowners association, I am the lucky woman who married up. But as I stood in the master bathroom, staring at my reflection in the gilded mirror, I did not look lucky. I looked hollow. My hands were shaking as I applied a second layer of concealer under my eyes. I was trying to hide the puffiness from 3 hours of crying, but mostly, I was trying to mask the gray cast that had settled over my skin. This morning, Dr. Evans had called with the results of our 5th round of in vitro fertilization. Negative. Again, my body was a bruised pincushion of hormone injections. A failed vessel that refused to do the one thing the Sterling family required of it, produce an heir. I took a deep breath, smoothing the silk of my navy cocktail dress. It was James's favorite. He liked me in blue. He said it made me look dignified, which was his polite way of saying it made me look obedient. Alice, are you coming down? Mother is asking about the wine pairing. James's voice drifted up from the foyer. It was smooth, rich, and pitched perfectly to sound affectionate to anyone listening, yet laced with a razor-thin edge of impatience that only I could hear. Coming, darling, I called back. My voice was steady. I was an excellent actress. I had been rehearsing for this role for 15 years. I walked down the grand staircase, my hand trailing lightly over the mahogany banister. The living room was already buzzing with the low, polite hum of the Sterling family's inner circle. There were 12 people tonight. My in-laws, Robert and Eleanor, held court by the fireplace. Robert was swirling a glass of scotch, looking red-faced and important, while Eleanor sat stiffly in her wingback chair, her eyes scanning the room like a hawk looking for a field mouse. When I entered, the conversation dipped for a fraction of a second, just enough time for me to feel the weight of their judgment. There she is, James said, stepping forward to wrap an arm around my waist. His grip was tight, his fingers digging slightly into my ribs. He kissed my cheek, a dry, performance-based peck. We were just worried you had gotten lost in your own house, sweetheart. The guests chuckled politely. I forced a smile. the muscles in my cheeks aching from the effort. I just needed to freshen up, I said softly. Eleanor set her teacup down on the saucer with a sharp clatter. Well, you certainly took your time. Punctuality is a virtue. Alice, especially when one has so few other responsibilities. A ripple of awkward silence moved through the room. This was the dynamic. Eleanor fired the arrows, and I was expected to catch them with a smile. I apologize. Eleanor, I said, taking a seat opposite her. I was not feeling my best today. Oh, is it? Xiao Jinghao Ling. 2 hashes greater than Eleanor paused, her eyes dropping deliberately to my stomach before flicking back to my face. Is it the news? James told us about the procedure. Another failure. I assume. My stomach lurched. James had promised he would keep the results private until we had processed them. But of course, he had told his mother. He told her everything. Yes, I whispered, feeling the heat rise in my neck. It was negative. A shame. Robert grunted, not looking at me. The trust fund stipulations are quite clear. James, the clock is ticking. You know your grandfather's will is not something we can negotiate with. I know. Father, James said, his voice tight. He squeezed my shoulder again, harder this time. Alice and I are doing everything we can. Are we not, Alice? I looked up at my husband. He was handsome in that sharp, angular way that aged well, but his eyes were cold. In them, I saw the accusation he never spoke aloud in public. This is your fault. This is your punishment. Yes, James, I replied. My inner monologue was screaming, clawing at the back of my throat. I have injected poison into my veins for you. I have let doctors prod me like cattle. I have spent nights weeping on the bathroom floor while you slept soundly. But out loud, I simply said, we are trying. The dinner was an exercise in torture. The conversation drifted from the upcoming charity gala for the local hospital to the new bylaws of the Homeowners Association regarding lawn ornaments. I nodded and ate my roast beef, which tasted like ash. Halfway through the main course, James's phone buzzed against the mahogany table. It was a harsh, vibrating sound that cut through the polite clinking of silverware. James glanced at the screen, and for a fleeting second, his mask slipped. I saw panic, genuine, sweating panic. He snatched the phone up. I have to take this, he said, standing up abruptly. James. We are eating. Eleanor scolded. Who could possibly be calling at this hour? It is business. Mother, the market is volatile. I will be right back. He walked out of the dining room, heading toward his study. I watched him go. James did not work in the stock market. He managed, or rather, mismanaged, the family's real estate portfolio, and he never took calls during dinner. It was one of his strictest rules. A knot of unease tightened in my chest. It was not just the rudeness. It was the vibe. The air around him had crackled with a desperate energy I had not seen in years. So, Alice, a woman named Margaret, the wife of a local judge, leaned in. She had a predatory glint in her eyes disguised as sympathy. Have you considered other options? My niece adopted a lovely child from Cambodia. Of course, it is not the same as one's own flesh and blood. But, Xiao Jinghao Ling, R. Jinghao Dayu, we are not considering adoption. Eleanor cut in sharply, her voice like a whip. A sterling is born. Margaret, not bought? I stared at my plate. I felt small. I felt like the intruder I had been 15 years ago. The poor girl who had stumbled into this dynasty and ruined everything. 10 minutes passed. James had not returned. "Excuse me," I murmured. "I just need to check on James." "Leave him be." "Alice," Robert grumbled. "Men have work to do." I ignored him and stood up. I walked softly down the hallway toward the study. The heavy oak door was slightly ajar. I could hear James's voice. He was not speaking in his professional baritone. He was hissing, his voice pitched high with hysteria. "Sao Jing Hao Ling. 2 hashes greater than I. Do not care what the contract says. I need more time. You cannot foreclose on the commercial properties yet. If my father finds out, Sao Yu Jing Hao Ling, Jing Hao, die you." There was a pause. "No, listen to me. The trust fund unlocks in 6 months. $10 million. I just need to produce the birth certificate. I will have the money. I just need a little more time to convince her." My breath hitched. Convince her? Convince me? I do not care if I have to drag her to a clinic in Mexico. James snarled, his voice dropping to a terrifyingly low register. "I will get that baby. I have a backup plan. I always have a plan." I stepped back, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Foreclosure? Debt? James had told me the business was flourishing. We just bought a vacation home in the Hamptons last summer. Suddenly, the door was yanked open. James stood there. His face was flushed, his tie slightly askew. When he saw me, the panic vanished instantly, replaced by a smooth, terrifying blankness. "Alice," he said, a smile stretching across his face that did not reach his eyes. "How long have you been standing there?" "I, Sao Jing Hao Ling. 2 hashes greater than I just got here." I stammered, my hands trembling behind my back. "Is everything okay? You sounded upset." James stepped closer, crowding my personal space. He smelled of expensive cologne and fear. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. His fingers were cold. "Everything is perfect, darling," he whispered. "Just a minor hiccup with a tenant. Nothing you need to worry your pretty little head about." He took my arm, his grip iron hard, and steered me back toward the dining room. "Come on. Mother was just telling a story about my brother. You remember Lucas, do you not?" The name hit me like a physical blow. Lucas. We had not spoken his name in this house for 15 years. Why would she talk about Lucas? I asked, my voice barely audible. James stopped. He looked down at me, and for the first time, I saw the trap springing shut. His eyes were gleaming with a dark, predatory hunger. "Because, Alice," he said softly, "I think it is time we reconnect with family. After all, family is everything, is it not?" The summons came on Sunday morning, just as the church bells from St. Mary's were pealing across the manicured lawns of Greenwich. It was not a request for breakfast. It was a command to attend a family meeting in the library. In the Sterling household, the library was not a place for reading. It was a place for sentencing. I walked into the room, my bare feet sinking into the antique Persian rug that James's grandfather had brought back from Tehran in the 1950s. The room smelled of old paper, leather polish, and the stale smoke of Robert's cigars. The curtains were drawn against the bright morning sun, casting the space in a perpetual, dusty twilight. James was standing by the fireplace, his back to me. Robert sat behind the massive oak desk that looked like a barricade, his fingers steepled under his chin. Eleanor stood by the window, peering through a crack in the velvet drapes, likely spying on the gardener to ensure he was not taking an unauthorized break. "Sit down, Alice," Robert said, He did not gesture to the comfortable leather armchair. He pointed to the stiff, high-backed wooden chair that faced the desk. It was the chair for petitioners and servants. I sat, folding my hands in my lap to hide the fact that my cuticles were raw from nervous picking. "We have discussed the situation," James said, turning around. His face was pale, his jaw set in a hard line. He looked like a man who had spent the night bargaining with God and lost. "Dr. Evans called me back this morning. He reviewed the samples again." My heart gave a hopeful flutter. Perhaps there was a mistake. Perhaps the test was wrong. "And?" I asked, my voice trembling. "The problem is not you, Alice," James said. The words seemed to physically pain him. He spat them out like sour grapes. "It appears that I have a condition, a genetic anomaly. My swimmers, as the doctor so crudely put it, are non-existent. I am sterile." Silence descended on the room. It was heavy and suffocating. For a man like James, whose entire identity was built on virility and legacy, this was not just a medical diagnosis, it was a castration. I felt a sudden, confusing wave of relief. It was not my fault. For 5 years, I had blamed my womb, my diet, my stress levels. But then, the relief washed away, replaced by a cold dread. If James could not give them an heir, what use did they have for me? "I am so sorry, James," I whispered. "Sorry does not fix the trust fund," Robert grumbled from behind the desk. He slammed his hand down on the wood, making me jump. "The deadline is approaching. If there is no male heir by James's 41st birthday, the capital goes to charity. The estate gets liquidated. We lose everything. The sterling name dies with us. We could adopt," I suggested tentatively. "There are agencies." "Sawi Jinghao Ling, or Jinghao Dayu." "Absolutely not," Eleanor snapped, turning from the window. Her face was a mask of horror. "A sterling is not picked from a catalog. Alice, we do not raise someone else's discard. The bloodline must remain pure. It is the only thing that matters." "Then what do we do?" I asked. "If James cannot, Sawi Jinghao Ling, or Jinghao Dayu." James walked over to me. He moved slowly, deliberately. He stopped just inches from my chair, looking down at me. His eyes were dark, unreadable pools. "There is another sterling," James said softly. My breath caught in my throat. "No, he has the blood," James continued, his voice taking on a hypnotic, persuasive rhythm. "He has the genes. He is my brother. Biologically, his child would be almost identical to mine. It would be a sterling." "Lucas?" I choked out the name. "You want to ask Lucas? He hates us. He has not spoken to you in 15 years. "He hates me," James corrected. "But he loved you once. Did he not?" The room seemed to tilt. I gripped the arms of the chair. "That was a mistake," I said, my voice rising in panic. "I was drunk. I was 23. You forgave me for that. You said we would never speak of it again. I forgave you," James said, crouching down so his face was level with mine. "I took you back when you were soiled goods. I gave you this life. I gave you this house. But forgiveness is not free. Alice, it requires penance." He reached out and took my hand. His skin was clammy. "Think of the poetry of it," he whispered. 15 years ago, you betrayed me with my brother. You slept with him and nearly destroyed our family. Now, you can sleep with him again, or at least take his seed. To save this family, it is the only way to balance the scales. It is the only way to make it right. I stared at him, horrified. This was madness. It was perverse. You want me to carry your brother's child? I asked. I want you to carry our heir. Eleanor interjected from the corner. The source of the biological material is a technicality. James will be the father on the birth certificate. We will raise the child. Lucas will simply be Saoyu Tsingholing. 2# is greater than a donor. He will never agree to this. I said, shaking my head. Lucas is Saoyu Tsingholing. 2# is greater than he is different now. I saw him in the magazines. He is a tech mogul. He does not need us. Everyone has a price. Robert growled, or a weakness. James squeezed my hand tight enough to hurt. He will not do it for money. James said, his eyes locking onto mine. But he might do it for you. He always had a soft spot for the damsel in distress. If you go to him, if you beg him, Saoyu Tsingholing, 2# is greater than, he might say yes. My inner monologue was screaming. Run. Get up and run out of this house. These people are monsters. They are asking you to prostitute your body and your past trauma for their bank account. But I did not run. I looked at the three of them. Robert, the failing patriarch desperate to secure his legacy. Eleanor, the cold matriarch obsessed with appearances. And James, Saoyu Tsingholing, 2# is greater than my husband. The man I had spent 15 years trying to please. The man who had convinced me that I was lucky he had not thrown me out on the street years ago. If I did this, I would finally be the mother I desperately wanted to be. I would hold a baby in my arms, and I would finally, truly be forgiven. The debt of my infidelity would be paid in full. I, Saoyu Tsingholing, 2# is greater than I cannot just sleep with him. I stammered, No, of course not. James said quickly, his demeanor brightening as he sensed my resolve crumbling. We will do it properly. Artificial insemination. A clinical procedure. We are not savages. Alice, we just need his sample. He stood up and smoothed his jacket. We fly to San Francisco tomorrow, James announced. Assuming the victory was already won, I have already booked the tickets. We will present it as a family reconciliation, a dying wish of the family legacy. I looked down at my hands. The diamond on my ring finger glittered under the dim library lights. It felt heavy, like a shackle. Okay, I whispered. What was that? Eleanor asked sharply. I said, okay. I repeated, louder this time, though my soul felt like it was withering inside my chest. I will do it. For the family, James smiled. It was the same smile he wore when he closed a real estate deal that he knew was bad for the buyer. He leaned down and kissed my forehead. That is my good girl, he murmured. I knew you would do the right thing. You owe us this. Alice, as I walked out of the library, leaving them to discuss logistics and legal contracts, I felt a hairline fracture spread through the foundation of my reality. I told myself I was doing this for love. I told myself I was doing this for a child. But deep down, in the dark corners of my mind where the truth hid, I knew I was walking into a nightmare. I just did not realize that the nightmare had started 15 years ago, and I was only just now waking up. The fog in San Francisco was nothing like the mist in Connecticut. At home, the morning dampness was polite and retiring, burning off by 10 o'clock to reveal manicured lawns and sensible Volvos. Here, the fog was a living, breathing entity. It rolled over the Golden Gate Bridge like a gray tsunami, swallowing the world whole. cold and indifferent to the people shivering beneath it. We sat in the back of a rented luxury sedan, winding our way up the steep, winding roads toward the Marin Headlands. James had insisted on renting the most expensive car available at the airport, a black beast of a sport utility vehicle that smelled of industrial cleaner, just to ensure we did not look like tourists, or worse, like poor relations coming to beg. I watched the landscape blur past the tinted window. My stomach was a knot of cold dread. I had not seen Lucas Sterling in 15 years. The last time I saw him, he was 20 years old, weeping in the driveway of the Sterling estate, his clothes stuffed into garbage bags, while James stood on the porch, arm around me, looking like a tragic hero protecting his wife. "Can you believe he lives this far out?" Eleanor complained from the front seat. She was clutching her pearls as the car took a sharp turn. "It is practically wilderness. No wonder he never married. Who would want to live in isolation?" "He is not isolated, Mother," James snapped, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "He is hiding. There is a difference." I looked at the back of my husband's neck. Sweat was beading at his hairline, soaking into the collar of his starch-stiff dress shirt. James was terrified. He was playing the role of the benevolent patriarch, coming to offer redemption. But the truth was in the tremors of his hands. We were not here to offer redemption. We were here to harvest a resource. We pulled up to a gate that looked less like the entrance to a home and more like the security perimeter of a government facility. There was no ornate ironwork or family crest, just a solid wall of brushed steel and a camera lens that swiveled silently to track us. James rolled down the window and pressed the intercom button. "James Sterling," he announced, his voice booming with forced authority. "Here to see Lucas." There was a long pause. The static on the line hissed. Then the gate began to slide open. Smooth and silent, we drove up a long, winding driveway lined with eucalyptus trees that smelled of menthol and rain. And then the house appeared. If the Sterling estate in Connecticut was a monument to the past, a museum of dark wood and darker secrets, then Lucas's home was a temple to the future. It was a cantilevered masterpiece of glass and concrete, clinging to the edge of the cliffside as if defying gravity itself. Floor-to-ceiling windows reflected the churning gray ocean below. It was stark, cold, and breathtakingly expensive. James parked the car next to a silver electric sports car that likely cost more than our entire kitchen renovation. We stepped out into the biting wind. "Ostentatious," Robert grunted, buttoning his tweed jacket. "New money always screams." "It is not screaming, Father," I thought to myself. "It is whispering, and it is saying that we are obsolete." The front door opened before we could knock. A woman in a sharp gray suit stood there. She held a tablet in her hand and did not smile. "The Sterlings," she stated, not asking. "Mr. Sterling is waiting for you in the lounge. Please follow me." She led us through a hallway that felt like an art gallery. The walls were adorned with modern abstract pieces that I recognized from magazines. Basquiat's and Warhol's. I felt a pang of envy so sharp it nearly winded me. I was an interior designer, or I used to be. I knew what this space represented. It represented freedom. It represented a life unburdened by the expectations of dead ancestors. We entered a massive room that overlooked the Pacific Ocean. A fire was burning in a sleek, suspended fireplace. Standing by the window, with his back to us, was a man. He turned around. Time is a cruel sculptor. but it had been kind to Lucas. The lanky, awkward boy, I remembered, had filled out into a man of imposing physical presence. He wore a simple black cashmere sweater and dark jeans, but the way he carried himself made James's three-piece suit look like a costume. His face was harder, the jawline sharper, and his eyes, those same piercing blue eyes that James had, were cold and clear. "Hello, James," Lucas said. His voice was deep, lacking the tremor that infected every word my husband spoke lately. "Lucas," James said, stepping forward with his hand extended. A politician greeting a constituent. "It has been a long time. You look Ling Ling. 2 hashes greater than well." Lucas did not take the hand. He let James's arm hang in the air for an agonizing 5 seconds before James awkwardly retracted it to adjust his cufflinks. 15 years, Lucas said. He did not look at his parents. He looked straight at me. My breath hitched. I wanted to look away, to hide behind James, but I was frozen. "Hello, Alice," he said softly. There was no anger in his voice, just a profound, weary disappointment that cut deeper than any scream could have. "Hi, Lucas," I whispered. "Well," Robert blustered, stepping into the center of the room to reclaim control. "Are you not going to offer your parents a drink? Or has California eroded your manners along with your morals?" Lucas gestured to a low table where a pitcher of water and 5 glasses sat. "Help yourselves. I do not keep alcohol in the house during the day. I find it clouds the judgment." James stiffened. It was a direct hit. James usually had 3 scotches before noon. "We are not here for social pleasantries," James said, his voice tightening. He pulled a thick leather folder from his briefcase. "We are here to discuss a business arrangement, a family matter." Family. Lucas repeated the word as if tasting something rotten. "You have not called me in a decade and a half. You did not call when my daughter was born. You did not call when my wife died 3 years ago. But now, suddenly, we are family." "We sent flowers for the funeral," Eleanor said defensively. "You sent a card signed by your secretary." Lucas corrected her. "Sit down." He did not ask. He commanded. We sat on the low, Italian leather sofas. Lucas remained standing, leaning casually against the glass wall, the stormy ocean crashing behind him like a dramatic backdrop he had commissioned. James opened the folder and slid it across the coffee table. "I will cut to the chase," James said, regaining his composure. "I cannot have children, medical issues. We need an heir for the trust fund. We need a Sterling." Lucas raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. "We considered a donor," James continued, waving his hand dismissively. "But the bloodline is paramount. Father and mother insist on it. And frankly, it is the only way to ensure the legacy remains intact." "So you want my sperm?" Lucas said. He said it flatly, without embarrassment. "We want a donation," Eleanor interjected, wrinkling her nose. "Let us be civilized about the terminology." "And in exchange?" Lucas asked. "What is in it for me? A Christmas card?" James smiled, the shark-like grin returning. "We are offering you a chance to do the right thing, to pay back the debt you owe this family for the shame you brought upon us years ago. And, of course, to help Alice. You always wanted Alice to be happy, did you not?" He used me as a weapon. I felt sick. "Read the contract." "Lucas," James urged. "It is a standard non-disclosure agreement and donor release." Lucas picked up the document. He flipped through the pages. his eyes scanning the legal jargon with a speed that suggested he was very comfortable with contracts. "Let me see if I understand this," Lucas said. Looking up, Clause 4. "I donate the biological material at my own expense. It is a small cost." James shrugged. Clause 7. Lucas continued, "I waive all parental rights. I will never meet the child. I will never be acknowledged as the father. My name will not appear on any document." "Standard procedure," Robert grunted. "We cannot have confusion." Clause 12. Lucas' head, his voice dropping an octave, despite having no rights. "The donor agrees to designate the resulting child as a primary beneficiary in his own estate planning, ensuring the child inherits no less than 30% of the donor's assets upon the donor's death." Lucas looked up, and for the first time, he laughed. It was a sharp, barking sound that had no humor in it. "You want my sperm?" Lucas said, tossing the contract back onto the table. "You want me to pretend the child does not exist, but you also want me to guarantee the child inherits a third of my company? You want to use my biology to secure your father's trust fund, and then use the child to siphon my wealth back into your pockets? It is only fair." James exploded. Standing up, his face was turning a dangerous shade of purple. "You stole my birthright. You slept with my wife. You humiliated me. You owe me this life. Lucas, you are sitting here in this glass castle while I am struggling to keep the family name alive." "Struggling?" Lucas looked around the room mockingly. "James, I had my team run a background check on you before you landed." The air left the room. James froze. "I know about the liens on the commercial properties in downtown," Lucas said calmly. "I know about the second mortgage on the Greenwich house. I know about the gambling debts in Atlantic City. You are not trying to save the family name. You are trying to save yourself from prison." "That is a lie," Eleanor shrieked. "How dare you slander your brother?" "Is it?" Lucas looked at James. "Tell them, James. Tell them why the trust fund is so urgent. It is not about legacy. It is about liquidity." James was trembling. He looked like a cornered rat. "You have no right," James hissed. "I am the eldest. I am the heir. You are a fraud," Lucas said. He turned his gaze to me. I was shrinking into the sofa, wishing the floor would open up and swallow me whole. I felt naked under his scrutiny. "Alice," Lucas said. His voice softened again. "Look at me." I raised my eyes. "Do you know what this contract really says?" he asked. "It says you are an incubator. It says you are a vessel to transfer money from my bank account to his. It has nothing to do with a baby. It has nothing to do with love. Sayuting 2# is greater than I want to be a mother." I stammered, tears spilling over my lashes. "It is all I have ever wanted." "I know," Lucas said, "and that is why they are using you, because they know you would walk through fire for a child. But this," he gestured to James and his parents, "this is not a family. Alice, this is a corporation, and it is failing." "Enough." Robert slammed his fist on the coffee table, shattering the glass pitcher of water. Shards flew across the expensive rug. "You ungrateful wretch. You will sign this paper, or we will take you to court. We will sue for grandparents' rights to see your daughter. We will drag your name through the mud. We know things about you." Lucas did not flinch at the shattering glass. He looked at his father with absolute coldness. "Get out of my house," Lucas said. "We are not leaving until you sign," James shouted. Lucas pulled his phone from his pocket and tapped the screen once. "I just alerted security," he said. You have 3 minutes before the police arrive. And unlike in Greenwich, the police here work for the taxpayers, not for the Sterling family. James stared at his brother, his chest heaving. He realized, perhaps for the first time in his life, that he had no power here. This was not his kingdom. You will regret this, James spat. You will pay for this. I have already paid, Lucas said. He looked at me one last time. Goodbye, Alice. If you ever decide to wake up, you know where I am. James grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my flesh like talons. Come on, he snarled, dragging me up from the sofa. We are leaving. This was a mistake. He is dead to us. As we walked out of that beautiful glass house, leaving the shattered water pitcher soaking into the rug, I did not look back, but my inner monologue, which had been a whisper for so long, was beginning to find its voice. He knew. I thought Lucas knew about the debts. He knew James was lying. And for the first time in 15 years, I wondered what else James had lied about. The fog outside was thick and blinding, but inside my mind, something was beginning to clear. The drive back to the Fairmont Hotel was a study in suffocating silence. James drove the rental sport utility vehicle like a man possessing a death wish, weaving through the fog-slicked curves of Highway 1 with white-knuckled aggression. Every time he braked too hard, my seatbelt locked against my collarbone, a sharp reminder that I was trapped in a metal cage with 3 predators who had just been denied their meal. I sat in the back seat next to Robert, staring out at the gray expanse of the Pacific Ocean. My hands were folded tightly in my lap to stop them from shaking. The scene at Lucas's house kept replaying in my mind like a corrupted film reel. The shattered glass, the coldness in Lucas's eyes, and the accusation, the terrifying accusation that James was not just sterile, but bankrupt and criminal. I looked at the back of James's head. His neck was flushed a deep, angry crimson. He was not grieving the loss of a brother. He was vibrating with the rage of an entitled child who had been told no for the first time in his life. When we finally pulled up to the hotel valet, James threw the keys at the attendant with such force that the young man flinched. We marched through the gilded lobby, ignoring the cheerful greetings of the staff, and took the elevator up to the penthouse suite. The moment the heavy door clicked shut, the explosion happened. James kicked a Louis Quinn's chair across the room. It skidded across the marble floor and crashed into the wall with a sickening crack of expensive wood. He thinks he is untouchable, James screamed, his voice bouncing off the high ceilings. He paced the room like a caged tiger, running his hands through his perfectly gelled hair until it stood up in wild tufts. He humiliated us. He humiliated me in front of my wife. Eleanor sat down on the velvet sofa, her face pale but her eyes hard as flint. She did not look frightened by her son's outburst. She looked calculating. Calm down, James, she said sharply. Hysterics are for the poor. We need a strategy. Strategy? James laughed. A high, manic sound. He threatened to call the police. Mother, he knows about the accounts. He knows about the loans. If he talks to the trustees before my birthday, it is over. The house, the cars, the club memberships, gone. We will be destitute. I stood by the minibar, feeling as though I were invisible. My inner monologue was a frantic whisper. Ask him if it is true. Ask him if we are broke. But the words died in my throat. I was too afraid of the answer. Robert poured himself a drink from the crystal decanter, his hand steady, He took a long swallow of amber liquid and turned to face us. "He has a weakness," Robert said, his voice gravelly and low. James stopped pacing. He looked at his father. "What weakness?" "He is a billionaire. He does not need us. He has a daughter," Robert said. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Emily," Eleanor murmured, a slow, reptilian smile spreading across her face. "Of course, the little girl. She is a sterling," Robert continued. "She carries the blood. And in the state of California, grandparents have rights, especially if they can prove that the father is alienating the child from her heritage, or if the father is unfit." "Unfit?" I spoke up before I could stop myself. My voice sounded small and tinny in the large room. "Lucas is not unfit. You saw his house. You saw him. He is Saoting Haling. 2 is greater than he is a good father." James spun around to face me. The look in his eyes was not human. It was devoid of any warmth, any recognition of me as his partner. I was merely an obstacle. "What would you know about being a good parent, Alice?" James sneered. "You have never been one." The insult landed like a physical slap. I recoiled, my back hitting the edge of the minibar. Robert ignored me and continued his train of thought. "We hire the best family law firm in San Francisco. We file a petition for visitation rights. We allege that Lucas is emotionally unstable. We bring up the suicide of his wife. We imply that growing up in that isolated glass box without a mother figure is damaging the child. We demand regular visitation," Eleanor added, her eyes gleaming. "And once we are in the door, once we have access to the girl, Saoting Hao Ling, 2 is greater than we have leverage. We trade the visitation rights for the sperm donation," James said, the gears turning in his head. "We drop the lawsuit if he signs the non-disclosure agreement and gives us what we want. It is a squeeze play. It is blackmail," I whispered. The room went silent. James walked over to me slowly. He moved with the predatory grace of a wolf circling a wounded deer. "What did you say?" he asked softly. I swallowed hard, trying to summon the courage that Lucas's gaze had sparked in me earlier. I said, "It is blackmail. James, she is a child. She is 5 years old. You cannot use a little girl as a bargaining chip for money. It is wrong. It is evil." James stopped inches from my face. I could smell the sour taint of scotch on his breath mingled with the metallic tang of his adrenaline. "Do not talk to me about evil, Alice," he hissed. He reached out and grabbed my upper arm. His fingers dug into my flesh, finding the soft spot between the muscle and the bone. I gasped in pain, but he did not let go. He squeezed harder. "You think you have the moral high ground?" James asked, shaking me slightly. "You? The woman who spread her legs for my brother while I was asleep in the next room? It was 15 years ago." I cried, tears springing to my eyes. "I was drunk. You said you forgave me." "I lied," James roared, his control finally snapping. He shoved me backward. I stumbled and fell onto the plush carpet, catching myself on my hands and knees. "I never forgave you," James spat, looming over me. "I tolerate you. I keep you around because you are useful, because you look good in pictures, because you are supposed to give me an heir to replace the one you and my brother corrupted." He leaned down, his face twisted into a mask of pure hatred. "You owe me this, Alice. You owe me your life. If I say we use the girl, we use the girl. If I say we burn Lucas to the ground, you will hand me the matches. Do you understand?" I looked up at him. I looked at Robert, who was casually sipping his drink. watching the scene with mild disinterest. I looked at Eleanor, who was checking her reflection in a compact mirror, adjusting her lipstick. They did not care. They did not care about me. They did not care about Emily. They did not even care about the unborn baby they claimed to want so badly. They only cared about the $10 million in the trust fund. I am not sure I can do this, I sobbed, my voice breaking. James grabbed a handful of my hair and yanked my head back, forcing me to look him in the eye. A sharp cry of pain escaped my lips. "You will do it," James whispered, his voice cold and flat. "You will do it because you have nowhere else to go. You have no money. You have no career. You have no friends because I made sure you cut them all off years ago. You are nothing without me. Alice Sterling. Nothing." He let go of my hair with a shove. I collapsed onto the carpet, weeping silently. "Get up," Eleanor said from the sofa, her voice bored. "Fix your face. Alice, we have a meeting with the lawyers in an hour. You need to look presentable. We need to look like a grieving, concerned family who just wants to see their beloved granddaughter." James walked over to the mirror and adjusted his tie. He smoothed his hair, the mask of the charming, successful businessman sliding back into place as if the monster had never emerged. "Stop crying, Alice," James said, checking his watch. "It is unattractive, and it does not change anything. We are going to get what belongs to us, one way or another." I lay on the floor for a moment longer, listening to the muffled sounds of the city outside. My inner monologue was no longer screaming. It was strangely quiet. It was the silence of a structure that had finally collapsed under its own weight. I realized then that I was not just a wife, I was a hostage, and as I pushed myself up from the floor, wiping the mascara from my cheeks, a terrifying thought took root in the darkness of my mind. If I was a hostage, then Lucas was the rescue team. But rescue missions often had casualties, and looking at the madness in my husband's eyes, I knew that before this was over, there would be blood on the floor. I just had to make sure it was not mine. The fog had turned into a steady, freezing drizzle that coated the streets of San Francisco in a slick, black sheen. It was 2 a.m, back in the hotel suite. James was passed out, snoring with the heavy, rhythmic grunts of a man who had consumed half a bottle of scotch to drown his rage. Eleanor and Robert were in their adjoining rooms, likely dreaming of lawsuits and custody battles. I was walking. I had slipped out wearing only my trench coat over my silk pajamas and a pair of running sneakers I had hidden in the bottom of my suitcase. I did not know where I was going. I only knew that if I stayed in that room, inhaling the recycled air that James exhaled, I would suffocate. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I flinched. Terrified it was, James waking up to find his possession missing. But the number was unknown. "Turn left at the next corner." The text message read, "There is a black sedan waiting. Get in." My heart hammered against my ribs like a frantic bird. Logic screamed at me to run back to the safety of the hotel. But instinct, a primal, survivalist instinct that had been dormant for 15 years, told me to keep walking. I turned the corner. The car was there. It was not the ostentatious rental sport utility vehicle James had chosen. It was a sleek, understated town car with tinted windows. The rear door clicked open. I slid inside. The interior was warm and smelled faintly of leather and sea salt. Lucas sat on the other side of the seat. He did not look at me. He was looking at a tablet on his lap, the blue light illuminating the sharp angles of his face. "Drive," he said to the partition separating us from the driver. The car glided into the traffic. You followed me. I said, my voice was hoarse. I have been watching the hotel since you left my house. Lucas replied calmly, I knew he would hurt you. James does not handle rejection well. I looked down at my arm, where 5 finger-shaped bruises were beginning to bloom purple against my pale skin. I pulled my coat tighter. He wants to sue you. I whispered, they want to take Emily. They are going to say you are an unfit father. Let them try. Lucas said. He finally turned to look at me. His eyes were not cold anymore. They were filled with a terrible, heavy pity. But that is not why you are here. Alice, you are here because you want to know the truth. He reached into a leather satchel on the floor and pulled out a thick manila envelope. He placed it on the seat between us. What is this? I asked. The life of James Sterling. Lucas said, the unedited version. I hesitated. My hand hovered over the envelope. I knew that opening it would be the end of my life as I knew it. But my life was already a lie. I picked it up. The first document was a bank statement. It was not from a reputable bank. It was from an offshore holding company in the Cayman Islands. Look at the bottom line. Lucas instructed. I scanned the numbers. They were red. Deep, horrifyingly red. He owes $4 million? I gasped. He owes $8 million. Lucas corrected. That is just one account. The rest are gambling debts. Atlantic City, Las Vegas, Macau. James has a problem. Alice. He has been leveraging the family assets for 5 years to pay off bookies and loan sharks. I flipped the page. There was a legal letter from the trustees of the Sterling Family Trust. The trust fund expires on his 41st birthday. Lucas explained. If he does not produce a legitimate male heir by that date, the principal amount, $10 million, rolls over to a charitable foundation. He does not want a son. Alice, he wants a key. He needs that money to pay off the debts before the sharks come for his kneecaps, or before the Federal Bureau of Investigation indicts him for embezzlement. I felt bile rise in my throat. All the pressure, the in vitro fertilization treatments, the tears, the guilt trips about carrying on the legacy. It was all a lie. He just needed a human shield against his own incompetence. But that is not the worst of it. Lucas said softly. He reached over and turned the page to the back of the file. There was a grainy, black and white photograph. It was time-stamped 15 years ago. It showed a hallway in the old Sterling summer house. I stared at the photo. I recognized the wallpaper. I recognized the door to the guest room where Saoyudzing Haoling 2# is greater than where it happened. In the photo, James was standing outside the door. He was holding a video camera. He was smiling. I do not understand, I whispered, my blood turning to ice. 15 years ago, Lucas said, his voice devoid of emotion, though his hands were clenched into fists. It was the night of the 4th of July party. You had 2 glasses of wine. I had 1 beer. Do you remember feeling that drunk? I searched my memory. It was a blur. I remembered laughing, then the room spinning, then blackness. I remembered waking up in Lucas's bed, naked, with James standing over us, screaming. We were not drunk. Alice, Lucas said. We were drugged. I looked up at him, my mouth falling open. He slipped Rohypnol into our drinks. Lucas continued. He knew our father was planning to change his will to give me a larger share of the company because he knew James was lazy. James needed a scandal. He needed to get rid of me, and he needed to trap you. You came from a good family. You had a small inheritance, and you were pliable. Tears streamed down my face, hot and stinging. He carried you into my room, Lucas said, his voice cracking slightly. He undressed you. He put you in my bed, and then he stood by the door and filmed it. He blackmailed me with the tape. He told me if I did not sign over my inheritance and leave the state, he would release the video to the police and claim I raped you. My inner monologue, which had been a quiet hum of anxiety for years, suddenly screamed. It was a primal roar of rage that shook my very soul. He knew. He did it. He watched for 15 years. I had carried the weight of a sin I did not commit. I had let James treat me like a criminal in my own home. I had washed his clothes, cooked his meals, and let him touch me, thinking I owed him a debt of gratitude for his forgiveness. But there was no debt. There was only a crime. He ruined my life. I whispered. He stole 15 years from me. He stole 15 years from us. Lucas said. I looked at the man sitting next to me. The brother I had been told was a villain. He was the only victim in this car besides me. I want to kill him, I said. The words tasted like metal. No, Lucas said firmly. You do not go to prison for a man like James Sterling. That is what he wants. He wants you emotional. He wants you irrational. Lucas took the file from my hands and closed it. James is a narcissist. Alice, he thinks he is the smartest person in the room. He thinks you are a weak, broken woman who will do whatever he says to save her marriage. I wiped the tears from my cheeks. The skin felt tight. Inside my chest, the fluttering anxiety was gone. In its place was something cold, hard, and sharp. It felt like a diamond. I am not that woman anymore, I said. Then prove it, Lucas said. He handed me a small universal serial bus drive. This contains copies of everything. The bank statements, the trust fund stipulations, and the affidavit from the old housekeeper who saw James spiking the drinks that night. I found her last year. What do? I asked, clutching the drive. You go back, Lucas said. You play the part. You be the dutiful wife. You let him think he has won. You let him draft the contracts. You let him think he is going to get my sperm and his $10 million. And then, when he is standing on the edge of the cliff, thinking he can fly, Lucas said, his eyes locking with mine. You push him. The car pulled up to the curb a block away from the hotel. The rain was falling harder now, washing the city clean. I opened the door. The cold air hit my face, but I did not shiver. I felt hot. I felt alive. Thank you, I said to Lucas. Make him pay. Alice, Lucas replied. I stepped out of the car and watched it disappear into the fog. I turned and walked back toward the hotel. I was walking into the lion's den, but I was no longer the lamb. I slipped back into the hotel suite. It was quiet. I crept into the bedroom. James was sprawled on the bed, his mouth open, drool pooling on the expensive pillowcase. He looked pathetic. He looked small. I stood over him for a long time, watching him sleep. Sleep well, my darling, I thought, a cruel smile touching my lips in the darkness. Dream of your millions. Dream of your legacy. Because when you wake up, I am going to become the nightmare you never saw coming. I crawled into bed beside him, my body stiff and alert. I did not sleep. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, sharpening the knife in my mind. The time for tears was over. The time for execution had begun. Morning light in San Francisco did not break. It bruised. The sun struggled through the heavy charcoal clouds, casting a sickly, pale illumination over the hotel suite. I sat at the vanity table, watching James sleep in the reflection of the mirror. He lay sprawled on his stomach, one arm hanging off the edge of the bed, his mouth slightly open, in sleep, stripped of his bespoke suits and his sneering arrogance. He looked remarkably unremarkable. He looked like a man who is afraid of the dark. I applied my lipstick. It was a shade called Blushing Rose, a soft, submissive pink that James preferred. He said red made me look cheap. Today, I needed to look expensive, fragile, and utterly broken. I needed to be the Alice he had constructed over 15 years. The porcelain doll with the hairline fracture, my inner monologue, however, was painting in war paint. Sleep, you parasite. Enjoy these last few hours of ignorance, because when you wake up, you are stepping onto a stage, and I have rewritten the script. James stirred. He groaned, rolling over and shielding his eyes from the gray light. The hangover from the scotch would be pounding behind his eyes like a sledgehammer. Good. Pain made him irritable, but it also made him sloppy. Alice, he rasped, his voice thick with sleep and malice. Where the hell is the coffee? It is coming. Darling, I said, turning on the stool. I kept my shoulders hunched, my hands clasped nervously in my lap. I ordered room service. Eggs Benedict for you. Black coffee. Extra aspirin. James sat up, rubbing his face. He looked at me with suspicion. The memory of last night's violence hung in the air between us, heavy and unspoken. He was waiting for me to cry, to apologize, or to beg. I went out last night, I said softly. James froze. His hand dropped from his face. The predator awakened instantly. You what? He asked, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. I told you not to leave this room. I went to see Lucas. I lied. The words tasted like ash, but they came out smooth as silk. James threw the covers off and stormed out of bed. He was wearing only his silk boxers. He grabbed my arm, yanking me up from the vanity stool. You went to see him? He shouted, shaking me. After he threw us out? After he humiliated me? What did you tell him? You stupid cow. Did you go there to cry on his shoulder? I let my body go limp in his grip. I let tears, real tears, summoned from the deep well of my exhaustion, fill my eyes. I went there to fix it. James, I sobbed. I went there for you. James stopped shaking me. He narrowed his eyes, searching my face for the lie, but he would not find it. He was too blinded by his own narcissism to see that the woman he thought was a doormat had become a landmine. What do you mean? He asked, loosening his grip slightly. I begged him, I said, looking down at the floor. I told him about the baby. I told him, Haoling. 2# is greater than I told him. I still loved him. In a way, I played on his guilt, James, just like you said I should. I told him that if he ever cared about me, he would help me become a mother. James stared at me. A slow, incredulous smile began to spread across his face. It was the smile of a man who had just drawn a royal flush. And, James pressed, his breath sour on my face. He agreed. I whispered. He said he would sign the papers. He said he would do the donation. For me. James threw his head back and laughed. It was a barking, triumphant sound that made my skin crawl. He pulled me into a crushing hug, lifting me off the floor. I knew it, he crowed, spinning me around. I knew he was weak, that pathetic, sentimental fool. He still carries a torch for you after all these years. God, it is too easy. He set me down and cupped my face in his hands. "You did good, Alice," he said, kissing me hard on the mouth. It was not a kiss of affection. It was a brand of ownership. "You finally made yourself useful." Useful, I thought, my mind sharpening into a blade. "Yes, James, I am very useful. I am the shovel you are going to use to dig your own grave. He wants to meet today," I added, keeping my voice tremulous. "At his lawyer's office, to sign the contract." "Perfect," James said, turning away to march toward the shower. "Call Mother and Father. Tell them to get down here. We need to celebrate. We are going to be rich." Alice, filthy, stinking rich. As the bathroom door slammed shut and the shower turned on, the mask fell from my face. I wiped the back of my hand across my mouth to remove the taste of him. I moved quickly. I knew where he kept his briefcase. It was by the nightstand, locked. James thought he was clever with his combinations, but he was predictable. The code was his birthday. 0714. The latches clicked open with a soft snap. My heart hammered against my ribs, not from fear of being caught, but from the sheer adrenaline of the hunt. Inside, the leather satchel was a chaotic mess of papers. I pulled out my phone. I did not use the camera app. The shutter noise might give me away. I used the scanning feature on a secure notes app Lucas had installed on my phone the night before. I scanned everything. There were demand letters from a casino in Macau threatening legal action for a debt of $200,000. There was a notice of default on a commercial property in downtown Stamford, and there, buried at the bottom, was a handwritten list of assets to liquidate once the trust fund unlocked. My name was on the list. Divorce Alice. Settlement capped at $50,000 per prenup clause 4B. The note read in James's jagged handwriting. Grounds: infertility, mental instability. I stared at the paper. A cold, dark laughter bubbled up in my chest. He was planning to discard me the moment the check cleared. He was going to take the baby, Lucas's baby, and throw me away like a used wrapper. "You are not going to get the chance, James. I thought, by the time I am done with you, you will not even have the shirt on your back." I heard the shower turn off. I shoved the papers back into the briefcase, snapped the locks shut, and spun the dials. I slipped my phone into my pocket just as the bathroom door opened. James walked out, a towel wrapped around his waist, steam billowing behind him. He looked rejuvenated. He looked like a king. "Get dressed, Alice," he commanded. "Wear the blue dress, the one with the high neck. We need to look respectable." 30 minutes later, Robert and Eleanor arrived at the suite. They did not knock. They simply used the spare key James had given them. "Is it true?" Eleanor asked, bypassing a greeting. Her eyes were bright with greed. Did he capitulate? He folded like a cheap suit, James bragged, buttering a piece of toast with aggressive strokes. Alice went over there and cried a few tears, and he handed over the keys to the kingdom. Robert grunted, settling his bulk onto the sofa. "Good. The boy always was soft. Too much of your mother in him. Watch your tongue." "Robert," Eleanor snapped, though she looked pleased. "So, the terms? Did he agree to the financial clauses?" "He agreed to everything," James said, taking a bite of his eggs. "He thinks he is doing a noble deed, saving his poor, barren sister-in-law." They all laughed. It was a cruel, chortling sound that filled the room. I stood by the window, staring out at the rain, my back to them. I pressed the record button on my phone inside my pocket. What about the girl? Eleanor asked, her voice lowering slightly. Do we still pursue the custody suit? We hold off for now, James said, his mouth full. Once the sperm is secured and the trust fund is released, then we can decide. Maybe we sue him later just for the hell of it. If we have partial custody of his daughter, we can control his estate even more effectively. Brilliant, Robert agreed. Keep the pressure on. Never let an asset go untapped. And Alice? Eleanor asked, her voice lowering slightly. Is she up for the procedure? She looks dreadful. She will do what she is told, James said dismissively. She knows her place. Besides, once the heir is born, her role is largely ceremonial. We can hire a nanny, a proper one. I listen to them dissect my life, my body, and my future as if I were a broodmare they had purchased at an auction. The pain I had felt for years, the desperate need for their approval, was gone. It had been cauterized by the white-hot heat of hatred. I turned around, plastering a shy, hesitant smile on my face. The car is downstairs, I said softly. We should not be late. Lucas, Xiao Yu Jing Hao Ling. Tu Hash is greater than Lucas, does not like to be kept waiting. James stood up, wiping crumbs from his chin. He walked over to me and adjusted the collar of my dress. That is right, he said. We must be punctual. We have a contract to sign. He offered me his arm. Shall we, Mrs. Sterling? He asked mockingly. I took his arm. His muscles were tense, coiled with anticipation. Yes, James. I said, let us go finish this. We walked out of the hotel suite, a perfect portrait of American affluence. James, the dashing businessman. Robert and Eleanor, the dignified grandparents. And me, the devoted wife. But as the elevator descended, dropping us toward the lobby, I felt a strange sensation. It felt like falling, but not the terrifying fall of a nightmare. It was the exhilarating, stomach-dropping sensation of a dive bomber locking onto its target. The ride to the lawyer's office was quiet. James spent the time texting on his phone, likely assuring his creditors that payment was imminent. Eleanor critiqued the San Francisco architecture, calling it soulless. I sat in silence, my hand resting protectively over my stomach, not because there was a baby there, but because I was holding myself together. We pulled up to a skyscraper in the financial district. It was a glass needle piercing the gray sky. This is it, James said, looking up at the building. The top floor. Fitting. We rode the elevator to the 45th floor. The doors opened into a reception area that smelled of expensive leather and intimidation. A receptionist with a headset looked up. The Sterling party? She asked. Mr. Lucas Sterling is waiting for you in conference room A. James adjusted his tie. He puffed out his chest. He looked at his parents, then at me. Remember, he hissed, let me do the talking. You just nod and look grateful. He pushed open the heavy double doors. Lucas was sitting at the head of a long, mahogany table. He was flanked by two lawyers in sharp suits. Behind him, the floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city he had conquered. He looked up as we entered. His face was unreadable. James, Lucas said, nodding. Mother, father, Lucas, James said, striding forward and pulling out a chair at the opposite end of the table. He sat down like a king claiming his throne. I trust you have the paperwork ready? We do, Lucas said. He slid a thick document across the polished wood. James did not even read it. He just picked up a pen, twirling it between his fingers. You made the right choice, brother, James said, his voice oozing false sincerity. This is best for the family, best for Alice. He looked at me. I was standing by the door, refusing to sit. Come sit down. Alice, James commanded. You should witness this. I walked slowly toward the table, but I did not sit next to James. I walked past him. I walked past Robert and Eleanor. I walked to the other end of the table and stood next to Lucas. The room went silent. Alice? James asked, his brow furrowing. What are you doing? Sit over here. I looked at Lucas. He gave me a barely perceptible nod. I turned to face my husband. My hands were no longer shaking. My voice was no longer a whisper. No, James, I said, my voice ringing clear and cold in the silent room. I think I will stand here. James dropped the pen. It clattered loudly against the table. What is this? He demanded, standing up. What kind of game are you playing? It is not a game, James, I said, reaching into my purse. I pulled out the universal serial bus drive Lucas had given me, and my phone with the fresh recordings. It is an intervention. I saw the confusion on his face curdle into fear. I saw Eleanor gasp. I saw Robert turn red. And in that moment, the tragedy began. Not for me, but for them. The silence in the conference room was not empty. It was heavy, pressurized, like the air in a submarine descending past its crushed depth. The only sound was the low, electric hum of the building's climate control system and the sharp intake of breath from Eleanor Sterling. James stood at the head of the table, his hand still suspended in the air where he had dropped the pen. His face, usually a mask of practiced charm, was contorting into a rictus of confusion and dawning horror. He looked at me, standing beside his estranged brother, and for the first time in our 15-year marriage, he did not see a reflection of his own needs. He saw a stranger. An intervention? James repeated the word, his voice cracking slightly. He let out a short, nervous laugh, glancing at the two stone-faced lawyers flanking Lucas. Alice, darling, you are embarrassing yourself. You are tired. The stress of the travel, the hormones from the treatments. Xiao Ting Hao, Ling. 2 hash is greater than it has made you hysterical. He reached out a hand, palm up, a gesture of benevolent control. Come here, he commanded softly. Sit down. Let the men finish their business. My inner monologue, once a terrified whisper, was now a judge delivering a death sentence. Look at him. He thinks he can whistle, and I will come running. He thinks I am a dog. I am not hysterical. James, I said. My voice was low, steady, and terrifyingly calm. And I am not tired. In fact, I have never been more awake. I reached into my purse and pulled out the thick manila envelope I had prepared. I tossed it onto the polished mahogany table. It slid across the surface with a hiss, stopping inches from James's hand. What is this? Robert demanded, his jowls shaking. We are here to sign a donor agreement, not play games with paperwork. Open it, I said to James. James hesitated. He looked at the envelope as if it might contain anthrax. Then, driven by an arrogance that refused to show weakness, he snatched it up and ripped it open. He pulled out the first document. It was a photocopy of the promissory note from the Golden Dragon Casino in Macau, time-stamped 3 months ago. The color drained from his face so fast it looked as if he had been physically struck. Where did you get this? He whispered. Keep reading, I said. He pulled out the next sheet. It was the foreclosure notice on the commercial complex in Stamford, the crown jewel of the Sterling portfolio. Or so he had told the family. "This is private financial data," James shouted, slamming the papers down. He turned on Lucas, his eyes wild. "You hacked my accounts. This is illegal. I will have you arrested for corporate espionage." "It is not espionage when it is public record, James," Lucas said calmly, leaning back in his chair. "You are sloppy. You missed 3 mortgage payments. The bank filed a notice of default with the county clerk last week. Anyone with an internet connection could find it." "Please," Eleanor shrieked. Standing up, she clutched her Hermes bag to her chest as if it could protect her from the truth. "My son is a brilliant businessman. The Sterling estate is rock solid. Your son is broke." "Eleanor," I cut in, turning my cold gaze to my mother-in-law. "He has leveraged every asset you own. The house in Greenwich, second mortgage, the Hamptons cottage, used as collateral for a high-risk loan that went bad last year." "That is not true," Robert stammered, looking at James. "James? Tell her she is lying." James did not answer. He was staring at the papers, his chest heaving. "But the debt is not the reason we are here," I continued, walking slowly around the table toward him. Every step felt like a hammer blow. "The debt is just the symptom. The disease is the lie you have been telling for 15 years. I took my phone out of my pocket. I tapped the screen and set it on the table, turning the volume up to the maximum. "I have a recording I think everyone should hear," I said. James lunged for the phone. "Give me that," before he could reach it. One of Lucas's security guards, a man who had been standing silently in the corner. I stepped forward and blocked him. James bounced off the man's chest like a child running into a wall. "Sit down, Mr. Sterling," the guard rumbled. I pressed play. James's voice filled the room, tinny but unmistakable. It was the recording from the hotel room this morning. Soyutsing Haling, 2 hashes greater than she, went there to cry on his shoulder. Soyutsing Haling, 2 hashes greater than I knew he was weak. That pathetic, sentimental fool. Soyutsing Haling, 2 hashes greater than you did good. Alice, you finally made yourself useful. The recording continued, the sound of his laughter, the way he bragged about manipulating Lucas. And then, the kill shot. Soyutsing Haling, 2 hash is greater than once the heir is born. Her role is largely ceremonial. We can hire a nanny. Soyutsing Haling, 2 hash is greater than divorce Alice. Settlement capped at 50,000. Soyutsing Haling, Artsing Dayu. I stopped the recording. The silence that followed was absolute. I looked at James. He was gripping the edge of the table so hard his knuckles were white. He looked like a cornered animal, stripped of its fur, shivering in the cold. "You bitch," he hissed. "You ungrateful, treacherous bitch. I gave you everything. You gave me nothing," I screamed back, my composure finally cracking to let the fire out. "You gave me a lie. You made me believe I was broken. You made me believe I owed you a debt for a mistake I made when I was 23. I reached into the envelope on the table and pulled out the final piece of evidence, the universal serial bus drive. But I did not make a mistake. Did I, James? I plugged the drive into the laptop connected to the conference room's main screen. Lucas's lawyer typed in a password. The massive screen on the wall flickered to life. A grainy, black and white video appeared. It showed a hallway. A younger, thinner James Sterling was standing outside a bedroom door. He was holding a camcorder. He was checking his watch. He was smiling. A cruel, predatory smirk. He put his ear to the door, listened, and then gave a thumbs up to the camera he was holding. "Turn it off," James roared. "Turn it off now." "No," Lucas said. His voice was like granite. "Watch it, James. Watch your masterpiece." On the screen, the younger James opened the door. The camera angle shifted. It showed a bed. It showed me, unconscious, my clothes in disarray. It showed Lucas, equally unconscious, slumped on the floor. "You drugged us," I said, my voice trembling with rage. "You put Rohypnol in our drinks at the 4th of July party. You staged the whole thing. You waited until we were passed out, and then you filmed it to blackmail your own brother out of his inheritance." Eleanor covered her mouth with her hand. She was not looking at the screen with moral horror. She was looking at it with social terror. "If this gets out, Xiao Yu Jing Hao Ling. 2# is greater than," she whispered. "The scandal, Xiao Yu Jing Hao Ling, Er Jing Hao Da Yu." "The scandal?" I laughed. A harsh, jagged sound. "Is that all you care about? Your son is a predator. He raped my life. He stole 15 years of my sanity. It was necessary," James shouted, slamming his fist on the table. "Look at him." He pointed a shaking finger at Lucas. "He was always father's favorite. He was going to get the company. I had to do something. I had to protect my birthright." "By destroying mine?" Lucas asked quietly. "You were weak," James spat. "You left. You ran away like a coward. It worked. It worked until today," Lucas said. Lucas stood up. He buttoned his jacket. He did not look angry. He looked like a man who was about to put down a rabid dog. "You came here for money, James," Lucas said. "You came here because the trust fund unlocks next week, and you need $10 million to stay out of prison. You thought you could trade my sperm for your freedom." "We have a deal," James insisted, his eyes darting around the room. "Alice said you agreed." "Alice lied," Lucas said, "just like you lied to her for 15 years. Lucas signaled to his lawyer. The attorney slid a different document across the table toward James. It was bound in blue legal paper. "What is this?" James asked, staring at it. "That," Lucas said, "is a notification of debt assignment." James blinked. "I do not understand." "I bought your debt, James," Lucas explained, his voice devoid of pity. "All of it. The loans from the Cayman Islands, the markers from the casinos in Atlantic City, the mortgage on the Greenwich house. I bought them all this morning. I paid 100 cents on the dollar." James's mouth fell open. "You, Xiao Yu Jing Hao Ling, 2# is greater than you own my debt. I own you," Lucas corrected. "And as of 5 minutes ago, I have called in the loans. You are in default, effective immediately." "You cannot do that," Robert blustered, standing up to defend his son, though he looked ready to have a heart attack. "We have grace periods. We have assets. You have nothing," Lucas said. "I have already filed for an emergency freeze on the Sterling Family Trust due to pending criminal litigation regarding fraud and embezzlement. The $10 million is locked down. James, you are not getting a penny." James looked at the document. Then he looked at Lucas. Then he looked at me. The reality of his situation crashed down on him. The money was gone. The house was gone. The reputation was gone. The wife he thought he owned had just delivered him to the executioner. He snapped, with a roar of pure, animalistic rage. James grabbed a heavy crystal water pitcher from the table and hurled it at me. "You traitorous whore," he screamed. Time seemed to slow down. I saw the pitcher spinning through the air. I saw the water spraying out in an arc. I did not flinch. Lucas moved faster than I thought possible. He shoved me aside, taking the impact of the pitcher on his shoulder. It shattered, sending shards of crystal and water everywhere. Before James could grab anything else, the 2 security guards were on him. They tackled him to the ground. James kicked and screamed, cursing, spitting, sounding less like a man and more like a demon being exorcised. Get off me. Do you know who I am? I am a Sterling. You are a broke criminal. One of the guards grunted, pinning James's face to the expensive carpet. Eleanor was sobbing now. Loud, ugly heaving sobs. Not for James. The club, she wailed. They will kick us out of the club. We will be ruined. Robert slumped into his chair, clutching his chest, his face gray. He was watching his legacy dissolve into a puddle of water and greed on the floor. Lucas stood up, brushing glass from his suit. He did not look at his brother writhing on the floor. He looked at me. Are you hurt? He asked. No. I said. I looked down at James. He was pressed against the floor, his cheek smashed against the wool. He looked up at me with one wild eye. Alice. I gasped. Alice, please, tell them to stop. We can fix this. I can explain. Baby, please. My inner monologue finally went silent. There was no more fear, no more guilt, no more need to please. There was only clarity. I reached into my purse one last time. I pulled out a folded document. I walked over to where James lay pinned on the floor. I squatted down, careful not to let my dress touch the wet carpet. James, I said softly. Alice, help me. He whimpered. This is not a donor agreement. I said, holding up the paper. This is a petition for divorce, citing adultery, fraud, and spousal abuse. I dropped the paper onto his face, and by the way, I added, leaning in close so only he could hear, I am going to keep the Sterling name, not because I want to be associated with you, but because I am going to be the one who redefines it. When people hear Sterling from now on, they will not think of you. They will think of the woman who brought you down. I stood up. I felt 10 pounds lighter. Get them out of here. Lucas said to the guards, the police are waiting in the lobby. No, no, James screamed as they hauled him up. Mother, Father, do something. But Robert and Eleanor did not move. They sat in their chairs, frozen statues of shame, refusing to meet their son's eyes. They knew the ship was sinking, and they were already calculating how to save themselves. I turned to Lucas. Thank you, I said. It is not over yet. Lucas warned gently. The press will be here in minutes. It is going to be a storm. I walked to the window and looked out at the city of San Francisco. The fog had lifted. The sun was shining on the bay, bright and blinding. Let it storm, I said, watching my reflection in the glass. The woman staring back at me was not the timid housewife from Greenwich. She was a survivor, and she was ready for war. I have nothing left to hide, I said, as the doors opened and the police marched in to handcuff my husband. I did not look back. I took a deep breath of the conditioned air. It tasted like freedom. The descent from the 45th floor to the lobby took less than 60 seconds. But in that minute, the world as the Sterling family knew it ceased to exist. When the elevator doors slid open, the flashing lights were blinding. It was not the police sirens, though there were plenty of those wailing outside on Montgomery Street. It was the paparazzi. Lucas had warned me that the press would be there. In a city fueled by tech billionaires and venture capital, the spectacular public implosion of an East Coast dynasty like the Sterlings was blood in the water. Someone in the building, perhaps a receptionist or a paralegal, had leaked the tip. The police officers flanked James, who was now handcuffed, his bespoke suit jacket draped awkwardly over his wrists to hide the steel bracelets. It was a futile gesture of dignity. His face was a mask of shock, his eyes darting around wildly like a trapped animal looking for a hole in the fence. Robert and Eleanor followed a few steps behind, their heads bowed. For the first time in their lives, they were trying to be invisible. Eleanor was clutching her purse to her chest, using it as a shield against the cameras. Robert looked gray, his breathing labored, as if the air in the lobby was too thin for him to metabolize. I walked out last. I walked alone. A wall of noise hit us the moment we stepped through the revolving glass doors. Shouts, questions, the aggressive, rhythmic clicking of camera shutters. Mr. Sterling, is it true you embezzled $10 million? James, did you drug your wife? Mrs. Sterling, are you standing by him? A microphone was shoved into James's face. He recoiled, shouting something unintelligible. A string of profanities that would be bleeped out on the evening news. He looked deranged. The polished, charming aristocrat was gone, replaced by a sweating, desperate criminal. I stopped on the top step of the plaza. I did not run to the waiting police cruiser. I did not hide my face. I looked directly into the bank of cameras. My inner monologue was calm, almost bored. Take the picture. Capture the moment. This is not my walk of shame. It is his. I saw a reporter from a major network. A woman I recognized from the nightly news. She locked eyes with me. She saw the bruises on my arm where James had grabbed me the night before. Bruises I had deliberately left uncovered by rolling up the sleeves of my trench coat. She saw the steel in my spine. She lowered her microphone slightly, a flicker of recognition passing between us. She knew. In that instant, the narrative shifted. I was not the accomplice. I was the witness. The police shoved James into the back of the squad car. He hit his head on the doorframe. A clumsy, undignified end to his reign. As the car pulled away, sirens screaming, the cameras turned to Robert and Eleanor. Mrs. Sterling, do you have a comment on your son's arrest? Mr. Sterling, is the family bankrupt? Eleanor let out a strangled cry and pushed past a photographer, stumbling toward a waiting taxi. Robert followed her, looking old and frail. They did not look back at me. They fled, leaving me standing alone on the concrete island. Lucas's security detail moved in to escort me to a separate vehicle, but the damage, or rather, the justice, was already done. The images were beaming across the country. Within the hour, they would be on every screen in America. I spent the next 4 hours at the San Francisco Police Department headquarters. The interview room was stark, smelling of stale coffee and industrial cleaner. I sat across from a detective named Miller, a woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. I gave her everything. I handed over the universal serial bus drive. I gave her the physical copies of the bank statements. I authenticated the voice recordings on my phone. When we played the video, the tape from 15 years ago, Detective Miller stopped taking notes. She watched the screen, her jaw tightening. She looked at me, then back at the screen where James was giving a thumbs up to the camera before entering the room to violate my life. That is enough, she said, turning off the monitor. We have enough to charge him with extortion and fraud. and spousal abuse. The sexual assault statute of limitations might be tricky given the time passed, but the blackmail, the financial crimes, he is not walking away from this. I signed my statement. My hand did not shake. When I walked out of the station, the sun was setting. The fog was rolling back in, claiming the city once more. I checked my phone. It had exploded. There were 53 missed calls. 4 were from numbers I did not recognize. 49 were from members of the Greenwich Homeowners Association and the Country Club. I opened a text from Margaret, the judge's wife, who had suggested adoption at the dinner party just 3 days ago. Alice, I just saw the news on cable news network. It is absolutely dreadful. The board is holding an emergency meeting tonight. They are voting to revoke the Sterling membership immediately. Morality clause. You understand. Please do not come to the club. I laughed. It was a dry, rasping sound. They were not worried about me. They were not worried about the fact that I had been drugged and lied to for 15 years. They were worried about the property values. They were worried that the stench of scandal would cling to their manicured fairways. I scrolled further. A headline from the New York Post popped up on my feed. Sterling Silver fraud. Heir arrested in billionaire brother's plot twist. The article detailed everything. Lucas's lawyers had been efficient. They had released a press statement clarifying that Lucas was the victim of an extortion attempt and that he had purchased the family debt to protect the integrity of the market. It painted James as a desperate, gambling addict. It painted Robert and Eleanor as enablers. And it painted me as the whistleblower. Alice Sterling, the wife of the accused, reportedly provided key evidence to authorities. The article read, "Sources say she has filed for divorce." I put the phone away. I did not feel triumphant. I felt hollowed out, like a building that had been gutted by fire, leaving only the brick facade standing. I went back to the hotel, but not the suite I had shared with James. Lucas had arranged a room for me at a different hotel, one that was quiet and anonymous. I sat on the edge of the bed and turned on the television. It was unavoidable. The story had everything the American public loved: old money, sex, betrayal, and a dramatic fall from grace. They showed footage of the Sterling estate in Greenwich. A reporter was standing outside the wrought iron gates. Sources tell us that foreclosure proceedings have been expedited. The reporter said, the wind whipping her hair. Robert and Eleanor Sterling, the parents of the accused, have reportedly been asked to vacate the premises by the end of the month. The contents of the home are expected to be auctioned to pay off creditors. I watched as a tow truck backed up the driveway. They were taking the cars. I saw Robert's vintage Jaguar being hoisted onto the flatbed. It looked like a dead carcass being hauled away. My inner monologue whispered, "This is what happens when you build a castle on a swamp." My phone buzzed again. It was Eleanor. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the decline button. Then, curiosity, or perhaps a need for closure, made me answer. "Alice," Eleanor screamed. Her voice was unrecognizable. It was high, shrill, and vibrating with panic. "You have to fix this. Call the police. Tell them you made it up." "Eleanor," I said calmly, "they are taking the car." "Alice, they are taking the furniture. The Homeowners Association president just called and said we are persona non grata. We cannot even show our faces at the grocery store. Do you know what you have done? You have murdered this family. I did not murder this family." "Eleanor," I said, looking at my reflection in the darkened window. "I just turned on the lights. You ungrateful little." I hung up. I blocked the number. Then I blocked Robert's number. Then I blocked the house number. I lay back on the pillows. The silence in the room was profound. For 15 years, my head had been filled with their voices, their demands, their criticisms, their gaslighting. Now, there was only silence. But silence is not peace. Not yet. Silence is just the space where the noise used to be. I closed my eyes, but I could still see the flashbulbs. I could still hear the click of the handcuffs. I knew that tomorrow, the real work would begin. The lawyers, the depositions, the public scrutiny. I would be called a gold digger. I would be called a traitor. People would ask why I stayed for 15 years. They would victim blame me for not knowing sooner. Let them talk. I thought, let them tear me apart in the comment sections. They could not hurt me. I had survived James Sterling. I had survived the death of my dreams. I was the one who struck the match. I would not apologize for the fire. I finally fell asleep, not to the sound of James's snoring, but to the sound of my own steady breathing. Alone, and for the first time in a decade, free. 2 years have passed since the gavel fell. I heard through the grapevine that James celebrated his 41st birthday last week. There was no champagne, no black tie gala, and certainly no $10 million trust fund deposit. He spent the day in the general population unit of a federal correctional facility in upstate New York. I imagine he told the other inmates that he used to be a king, that he used to own this world, but I doubt they listened. In there, the currency is not lineage. It is strength, and James never had any of that. He was only ever strong when he was standing on someone else's neck. I also heard about Robert and Eleanor. Lucas told me during one of our brief, polite email exchanges. They are living in a state-subsidized nursing home in New Jersey. The facility has a 2-star rating. Apparently, Eleanor spends her days complaining to the nurses that the polyester sheets are scratching her skin, while Robert stares at the wall, muttering about market fluctuations that no longer concern him. They are alone, surrounded by the mediocrity they spent a lifetime despising. It is a cold, hard justice, but I do not dwell on it. I do not have the time. I live in Charleston now. The air here smells of jasmine and salt water, not old money and desperation. I bought a small, fixer-upper cottage with the money I earned from selling my jewelry and working double shifts at an interior design firm. It is not a mansion. The floors creak, and the porch needs painting, but it is mine. Every nail, every beam, every coat of paint belongs to me. I sat on the porch swing, pushing it gently with my bare foot. In my arms, a bundle of warmth shifted and let out a soft coo. I looked down at my son. His name is Julian. He is 6 months old. He has bright, curious eyes and a tuft of dark hair that sticks up in the back no matter how much I smooth it down. People in the neighborhood assume I am a widow, or perhaps a divorcee who started over. They ask about his father. They look for a resemblance. Does he have James's nose? Does he have Lucas's chin? My inner monologue smiled. A secret, warm thing blooming in my chest. They look for ghosts, but there are no ghosts here. The final twist of the knife, the one secret I kept even from Lucas, was the origin of this child. When I left Connecticut, I was broken, but my desire to be a mother was the one thing the Sterlings could not crush. I did not want James's bloodline. I did not want to be contractually bound to Lucas. Despite his kindness, I wanted a child who was free. So, I used the last of my savings. I went to a clinic in the city. I chose an anonymous donor from a catalog. I did not look for status or wealth. I looked for a clean medical history and a kind profile essay. Donor number 492. A science teacher from the Midwest who liked hiking and playing the cello. Julian is not a sterling. He will never have to carry the weight of that toxic name. He will never have to worry about trust funds or legacies or appearing perfect for the country club. He is just Julian, and I am just his mother. He reached up, his tiny hand grasping my finger. His grip was strong. He smiled, a gummy, drooling expression of pure joy that had no agenda. I looked out at the street. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of violet and gold. A neighbor walked by, walking her dog, and waved. I waved back. For 15 years, I thought my value lay in who I married. I thought I was defined by the man standing next to me. I thought I was a vessel, empty until filled by someone else's purpose. I squeezed Julian's hand gently. I was wrong. I was never empty. I was just waiting for the right time to bloom. I stood up, lifting my son against my shoulder. He smelled of milk and baby powder, the sweetest scent in the world. Let us go inside. Julien, I whispered into his soft hair. It is time for dinner. I walked into my small, imperfect house and closed the door with a solid click. I locked the world out, not out of fear, but out of peace. The nightmare was over, the debt was paid, and for the first time in my life, the future was a blank page, and I was the one holding the pen.